Greetings, dear listener. Subscribe to the channel so as not to miss new scary stories and support me with a like. Enjoy listening.
Hello, listener. My name is John, and I'm writing this story just to warn you about one thing. Be careful with people. You never know who might actually be hiding behind the mask of a friend, work colleague, or neighbor. I don't want to undermine your trust in others. Just be careful. Otherwise, it will be too late. Well, yes, and I also want to ask you for advice on what I should do now. But first things first. It all started when my grandmother was admitted to the hospital. Because of this, I had to take unscheduled leave from work to monitor her animals in the village. In general, I arrived at the place, laid out my things, fed the geese and chickens, and then went to bed. I was too tired and didn't feel like chatting with my neighbors. I'll say hello in the morning. There's no need to rush, I thought. Even though the neighbor's house was located right next to my grandmother's house, I still did not intend to establish familiar relations with the locals. In any case, I would soon move back to the city. In the morning, I was already full of strength. I made myself a delicious omelet from homemade eggs, took a cup of aromatic coffee with me, and went out onto the porch. By the way, it overlooked the neighbor's house. It was summer. The weather was beautiful. I just basked in the sun, leaning on the railing, and breathed in the clean air, not polluted by the city dirt. I felt so high that I even closed my eyes for a minute. When I opened my eyes, I was a little surprised. A neighbor stood opposite my grandmother's house. Well, I could have just stood, but he kept looking at me, and what's even stranger, he was barefoot. Although there was a completely simple excuse for this. Summer was outside, it was warm. Why not take a walk barefoot? In short, he stood there for about 5 minutes, after which he went into the house. I looked after him in disbelief, finished my coffee, and entered the house. Having completed my household chores, I dropped by my grandmother's neighbor and asked her about this guy. This is what she told me. "Oh, this is Anton. Strange guy. Lives here for a long time alone. Always so silent. You better stay away from him, boy. We are afraid of him." A year ago, 2 of our girls disappeared, and just then I heard screams from Antonic's house at night. The police were called. They went around the forest and searched Anton's house. They didn't find anything, but that's the end of it. They said that these girls were killed by animals in the forest, but I know what really happened to them. Take care of yourself and stay home more often. I thanked her for the warning and went home. I spent the rest of the day doing household chores. From time to time, I glanced at the neighbor's yard. Anton was poking around in the garden and the chicken coop and generally doing ordinary village things. He didn't look at me anymore, and I was glad about that. In the evening, when it got dark, I once again went to have coffee on the porch. Anton, apparently, was in the house. The light was on in the room on the second floor. After finishing my invigorating drink, I decided to watch TV in the living room. Its windows faced the side where Anton's house was located. From time to time, I glanced at my neighbor's abode, and about midnight, the light in the room above went out. Antonic's house plunged into darkness. After half an hour, fatigue overcame me too. I turned off the TV and went to bed. The night passed peacefully. I woke up in a great mood and decided to go to the village store for food. I went out into the yard and freaked out. Anton again stood barefoot against the wall and silently stared at me. Whether he had been standing there since early morning or had somehow caught the moment when I was going outside, I didn't care. This was just stressing me out and infuriating me. Yes, he was creepy, but I had to figure out what was going on and why the hell he was glaring at me in the morning. Taking my will into a fist and trying with all my might not to show fear, I walked up to my neighbor with a confident gait. I was about to open my mouth, but the man beat me to it. He waved his hand at me in a friendly manner and said, "Hello, neighbor. Let's come to my place for tea." I was doubly shocked. He doesn't know me, and he hasn't introduced himself, and yet he's already inviting me over for tea. My inner voice was persistently trying to hammer into me that something was wrong here. As a result, I smiled idiotically and mumbled, "Thank you, I already drank tea. Goodbye." After which he quickly walked away from this psycho. As I walked out the gate, I looked back and saw my neighbor smiling, waving goodbye to me. Without slowing down, I finally went to the store. I bought food and animal feed and went back. I held bags in both hands. I was already halfway to the house when suddenly I literally froze in place with fear. Antonic was walking towards me along the road. His bare feet shuffled across the sand. I wouldn't have been able to miss him because the damn road was too narrow and, as luck would have it, there wasn't a soul nearby. I quickened my pace and lowered my gaze to the ground. Now I'm approaching my neighbor and hear, "Hello, how are you doing? Were you in the store too? Can you tell me if there is still chicken feed there?" Antonic said this in such a friendly voice that I even relaxed a little. I raised my head and looked at my neighbor. He smiled sweetly and added, "Sorry, I didn't introduce myself. My name is Anton." With these words, he extended his hand to me for a handshake. I literally felt in my gut the falsity and pretense of what was happening. No, he never went to the store. His hands are empty. What did he carry the money in? In your pockets? So he doesn't have them, neither on his t-shirt nor on his shorts. And his bare feet? I understand that it's summer and everything is going on, but he's walking down the street. He should at least put on sandals or something. This infection is tracking me and wants to catch me. I looked at his outstretched hand and I had the feeling that if I shook it now, he would grab me and kill me. I lifted the bags and told him, "Very nice, John. Yes, there is plenty of chicken feed. Damn them. How they got me. Sorry, my hands are full. I'll run home." With these words, I quickly walked home. Having walked a little forward, I turned around. The damned neighbor was still looking at me with a smile, only his eyes were frowning and his hands were trembling, like a hunter who had missed his prey. When I got home, I ran into the chicken coop and hastily poured the grain into the feeder, causing it to scatter on the ground. The birds, crazy from such a spectacle, looked at me as if I were some kind of fool. I left the chicken coop, went into the house and locked the door. Then I cooked dinner, and the fear gradually let go of me. In the evening, while watching TV, a bad but damn interesting thought came into my head: to sneak to a neighbor's house and peek through the first-floor window. Why do I need this, you ask? You won't get an answer because I myself don't know why. Just, yes, idiotic thoughts sometimes lead to the grave. I still regret that I went into his house. If I had not done this then, perhaps the subsequent events would not have happened at all. So, I waited until the lights went out in my neighbor's house and went on my spy mission. I quietly climbed over the fence like a master ninja and silently clung to the window. The room was pitch black. The room was illuminated only by the dim light of the moon, but I was still surprised to be able to see what was happening. This room turned out to be the living room. There was a covered dining table against the far wall, behind which Anton sat slightly obliquely. He didn't see me, but I saw him perfectly. There was a good piece of meat on his plate, and meanwhile his neighbor was chewing this chop and sipping red wine from a glass. And then I saw something that I will never forget. I quite clearly saw a lifeless female silhouette on the sofa. Not wanting to tempt fate any longer, I backed away from the window, but lost my footing and fell with a crash onto the rustling gravel. I immediately got up, rushed home, and called the police. It was impossible to hesitate. I knew that this Antonique was absolutely a psychopath. And if it turns out that the girl was just sleeping, then let them fine her for making a false call. Spit. I'll be calmer. The police arrived quite quickly. They broke into Antonic's house, and my worst fears were confirmed. In the room lay 3 mummified female bodies, which were tied to the wall by the necks, 1 on the sofa and 2 near the stairs. Later, the policeman told me that during interrogation, Anton said this: "My thoughts were kind and pure. I just wanted to let them feel true happiness, and I'm sure they were happier than ever. They told me that they were tired of household chores, that they were tired of everything, and I freed them from all this torment. I helped them. Anton was taken to some police station, and his house was sealed. The grandmother's condition began to improve, and the doctor said that in about a month she would fully recover and return home. It was as if I was inspired, two good news at once. Grandma would be back soon, and this psychopath was put behind bars. Now I was ready to live in the village for at least 100 years. About a week had passed since Anton's arrest. Everything was peaceful. And then, one day, a rumor spread through the village that Antonik had escaped from the police. I tensed up, but I didn't want to believe the rumors and worry unnecessarily, so I just continued to live as before. The next day, I saw my grandmother's neighbor running around the yard, excited. I asked her what happened, and she told me that her attic roof was leaking. She has no children, there is no one to help, and the services of builders cost a lot. Arriving in a great mood, I generously offered to fix the roof myself. She, of course, was delighted and happily responded to my proposal. An unpleasant surprise awaited me. The problem with the roof turned out to be serious. I had been fiddling with it all day. As a result, I finished the repair around 11 p.m. A neighbor offered to have dinner with her and even spend the night. Although it was 2 steps from my house, I was so tired that I could not get there, and therefore I gladly ate a home-cooked roast and lay down on the kindly made bed in the attic. Having woken up and had breakfast, I thanked my neighbor for her help and went home. Approaching the door, I was a little surprised. The keyhole was badly scratched, as if they had tried to pick the lock, first patiently and then as if in rage. I looked down and saw that someone had inserted a letter into the gap between the floor and the door. I picked it up. It was a homemade envelope made of plain white paper, which was sealed with a sticker in the shape of a pink skull. I opened the letter, and I will never forget what I read in it. "Hello, John. I'm really sorry. It's a pity that I couldn't kill you. But I was able to escape and came to your house at night. You also came to me that night. I'm so upset that you're gone. You've probably already left for the city, and that makes me very sad. I am tormented by my conscience for not helping you. You said you were fed up with housework. I so wanted to free you from them, to make you relax and be happy. And so I came, but you were not there. But it's okay. I'm free now. There's nothing holding me back anymore. I can't stay in the village because they're looking for me. I'll hide somewhere for now, but don't worry. I'll be back soon. John, I promise I will find you. I will do my best to make you feel true happiness and joy. I will help you. Please wait for me." I asked to spend the night with a neighbor until the day my grandmother returned. She agreed. When Grandma finally returned, I got out of that village to hell. 4 months have passed since that incident, but not everything is so simple. In general, I need your advice. What to do? Today is Saturday. I went down to check the mailbox and found at the bottom a crookedly scribbled message on a crumpled note. "John, I found you. I'll help you soon."
So when I was in high school, there were a few disturbing occurrences in my neighborhood. A woman down the street who lived alone woke up one night to go to the bathroom and heard her TV on in the living room. So she naturally wandered in there, assuming nothing out of the ordinary. She found a guy sitting on her couch, watching the TV, started screaming, obviously terrified, and the guy ran out of her house. Maybe a week later, further down the street, there was a family with a young daughter. She woke up in the middle of the night with her bedsheets pulled down and a guy tickling her feet. Again, started screaming, and the guy fled. Another week or so later, 3 houses down where an elderly couple lived. The husband woke up in the middle of the night to find a man standing over his bed and staring at his wife sleeping. The old man started hollering at the guy, and the guy fled again. So now *T is on super high alert. Cops patrolling regularly, etc. They somehow figured out who it was, and everyone in the neighborhood got a flyer with his picture. Behind us was a densely wooded area that stretches for a couple of miles in every direction. This guy had been literally living in those woods for upwards of a month in a tent, doing God only knows what when he wasn't breaking into houses. But the creepiest part of the story is this. One night in the middle of all these incidents, we had our sliding glass door open with just the screen door behind it shut. This was in the summer. We had a big backyard, and it was pitch black back there at night. Our dog suddenly jolted up and started growling viciously, like I'm talking tail stiff as a board, hair on his neck standing up, etc. Our dog was the best, nicest dog, like, ever. He never did that. So naturally we were like, what the F***ck? My father jumped up and put the floodlight over the deck on to see what was back there, but there was nothing. The next morning, we were outside doing yard work and noticed the lock on our back gate was broken. Someone had clearly done it. It wasn't like it was wear and tear or something like that. It's very safe to assume that this guy had tried to get into our backyard/house but was deterred by my dog's growling/barking. 15 by 10 good boy. Next story. My dad lives in an apartment, and one day, he came home to cops outside of his door. It was very early, 5 o'clock or 5:30 a.m. They asked if they could ask him some questions, and my dad said of course, invited them in, and made them breakfast. They asked him some questions about his neighbor across the hall. Just general stuff like, have you noticed anything weird, etc. My dad told him no. He looks like a well put together, 30-ish-year-old businessman. My dad lives in higher-end apartments, so this is what everyone looks like. Nothing weird or out of the ordinary. The cops go on to explain that a 30-year-old woman is missing and was last seen by a security camera walking into the building with this man, but they never had any footage of her, or him for that matter, leaving the apartment. The cops stay outside and monitor the apartment until about 5 o'clock that night when they finally get a warrant. They notice a shower curtain missing and golf clubs scattered on the bedroom floor. They end up arresting the guy. Fast forward 3 weeks, and the cops find her body about 45 minutes south in the woods on the side of a bike trail. Some runner stumbled upon her. Nothing more was released on what state she was in. Then about 2 months ago, they found more tapes. As the investigators went back to look at them, they discovered the man leaving the apartment with his golf bag. But like I said earlier, all of his clubs were in his room. I'm sure many people have put 2 and 2 together. A full-size woman wouldn't fit in a golf bag, but that's how he got her out. His trial is coming up. As of right now, he claims it was an accident and he panicked and tried to hide it since he had a girlfriend. He had seen me stumbling to my front door drunk and decided he'd try playing into my obviously altered state. I was young, so I still wasn't sure how to handle those types of males, and my birthday had just passed, so when he gave me a hug, I assumed it was just a nice gesture. Then I tried hurrying off, but he kept trying to come in and have a beer to celebrate more appropriately. He refused to take no for an answer, so I pretended like I didn't have my house keys to hold him off. I walked a little bit off to the side pretending to call someone who might have my keys, but I really called my cousin telling him how freaked out I was. He rushed over to get me right away. Neighbor dude was in his 50s and I was 22. He didn't take kindly to my rejection that night and ended up poisoning my dogs later on out of pure pettiness. I didn't really talk to him, but I'm pretty sure he did something to his wife and 2-year-old daughter. When I met the wife, I was maybe 10 or so. She was really sweet. The husband, however, was kinda sketchy. He had a very expensive car, and the only thing he would ever do was drive or wash it. Once, my friend and I were playing around outside in mid-June, and he started to pull out of his driveway. My friend jokingly yelled out, "Why do you drive around so much?" He replied, "Because driving is the only thing to do in this piece of town," and sped off, but not before flipping us off. A couple of months later, the police came knocking. They asked my mom if she knew anything about the neighbors, said that he and the wife had supposedly gotten divorced, and asked if we knew the whereabouts of his wife/kid. We said no, of course, and they told us that apparently the wife ran away and they couldn't track down the daughter. The only thing we knew about the wife was that she had a 2-year-old, was maybe pregnant, and that she drove a white Jeep. A couple months later, the husband was cleaning his car, and my mom and I were leaving for an appointment, when my mom noticed the white Jeep in the garage. If the wife had run off, then wouldn't she have taken the Jeep? The dude saw that my mom had noticed the white Jeep, and a couple days later, he sold it. At one point, we had gotten a package for them delivered to our house. So, we went to return it. His house smelled like pot and the deceased, and we saw a gun on the dining room table. I really hoped that it was a misunderstanding or something, and that the wife took the kid and ran as far as she could. Next story. So I had a neighbor, 80 or more, widowed guy. Every time I get the newspaper delivered to my mailbox, when I open it, I find the crosswords done. I don't do them or give a damn. One day I decided to try catch who's doing my crosswords. Day 1, 8 am, they were already done. Day 2, 7:30 am, already done. Day 3, 7 am, I decide to give up. One day, 4 am, I was getting back home from a night out. While I was passing by the mailbox, nothing yet delivered, so I placed my GoPro inside and went sleeping. The next day, finally got it. It was my neighbor. He has done the crosswords right up on my mailbox for like 10 minutes. I will try to find the video, but it was absolutely cute, staring at my door time to time and scratching his head. Next day, I took him a 1000 crosswords book, drop it right his door, rang the bell, and stayed on my car discreetly. He took some time to open the door, then found it. I swear it was the happiest person, like a kid that got a puppy. He stayed in his porch and passed like 2 hours doing crosswords, then fell to sleep, lol. Next story. Growing up, we had some really crazy neighbors that lived across the road from us. The parents were real nutters and abusive to their kids. They would regularly lock their children out the front of their house and lock the front gate so they couldn't leave with nothing but one glass of water. Now this is outback Australia, where temperatures would regularly reach 40 to 45 degrees. The kids would be screaming and crying out the front. Police would get called, they'd come. Kids would go back inside, then get put back out once they'd left. The mother would also come out the front of the house when my mom would be farewelling or greeting people and start yelling, "Mrs. Kahlo 89, why won't you be my friend? I know you think I'm crazy. Please be my friend." A few years ago, I heard the mother had been committed to a psychiatric hospital. Husband remarried, and kids have nothing to do with them now. Next story. My neighbor secretly does my yard work. He's a very reserved man in his 50s, and my fiancée and I are in our mid/late 20s. Our neighbor never talks to us and will frantically avoid conversation with other people. He blows the leaves in his yard every single day, even during summer. He also waxes his car once a week. If there's a storm, the next day he'll walk around his yard, picking up twigs that have broken off of trees until his yard is perfectly clear of twigs. I should mention we live in a forest, and both of our yards are at least an acre or so, with dozens of trees. The yard obsession doesn't end with his property line though. At least once a month I'll come home and our yard is magically groomed. The leaves have been blown. Even if we just blew the leaves a few days prior. Our gravel driveway has been sprayed for weeds. Our tiny section of grass has been mowed, etc. We take care of our yard. I have flower beds I maintain, and we do a big yard maintenance day once a month. But it doesn't come close to our neighbor's yard maintenance. I've even caught him in our yard a couple of times, and he just hustles out without saying a word. We have a picket fence around our acre lot, so it makes him silently leaving our yard just a little awkward since he has to walk all the way up to the gate. I've tried to thank him multiple times, but the last time I brought him cookies as a thank you for blowing our leaves, he would only open the door a crack, take the cookie tin, dump the cookies into his hand, handed me back the tin, and quickly shut the door. Now I just leave thank you cards in his mailbox. I'm guessing he's either bored, has an obsession with yard maintenance, or is just trying to be nice to the young couple next door but really hates social interaction. His house. I'm filled with fear as I write this, hidden away in my closet. I believe my life is in danger. Let me provide some context. I'm a 27-year-old woman living next to a middle-aged Caucasian man. He's tall, handsome, and athletic, but he lost his wife 7 months ago in a car accident, which he barely survived. As his neighbor, I've tried to comfort him, offering gifts and support to help him move forward. However, he seems to have lost all his joy for living, rarely leaving his house except to buy groceries. When he used to go for runs and try to get outside every day, everything had been relatively peaceful until tonight. I was snuggled up on my couch, wrapped in blankets, watching the latest season of The Bear. Suddenly, I heard his car starting up, which caught me off guard since he had bought groceries just yesterday and only did so every 5 days. Intrigued, I paused the TV and glanced out the window behind me. There he was, getting into his car. I assumed he must be going out to get medicine since he seemed unwell. 2 episodes later, his car returned. I didn't think much of it until 10 minutes later, I heard blood-curdling screams and continuous thudding noises coming from his house. Terrified, I quickly turned off the TV and turned my head around. What I saw sent chills down my spine. A massive, 8-legged humanoid creature, about 9 feet tall, was attaching human body parts to its own body. I watched in horror and shock as it dismembered several bodies, adding their arms, legs, and heads to itself. Overwhelmed by fear, I rushed into my basement closet and dialed the police for help. The operator who answered the call laughed at me, thinking it was a prank, and abruptly hung up. Determined, I called back, hoping to find someone who would take me seriously. Unfortunately, another operator responded with the same dismissive message before hanging up. Here I am now, trembling with fear and grappling with countless questions. Why did my neighbor have those bodies in his house? Have any of my other neighbors sought help from the authorities? And what in the world is that thing lurking in my neighbor's house? I turned to Reddit, pleading for assistance. I'm unsure of what to do, and the screams outside only reinforce my belief that the creature is targeting my neighbors. My mom's bad feeling might have saved me as an infant. She was walking with me in a stroller down her suburban neighborhood street. She says she started to feel a tingling feeling like she was being watched, so she decided to turn around and head back home. A few streets later, she noticed a car driving slowly behind her. The driver, a man, starting at her and me. She starts walking a bit faster and notices he drives a bit faster to keep up, so she gets really scared before she can start running. This is the 90s and she didn't have a cell phone. He rolls down the window and tells her not to run or stop because she's being stalked by a coyote. He saw her safely to our doorstep and then pointed out the coyote, who had followed us half a mile and looked rangy and desperate. It had been slipping from brush to brush looking for an opening. So glad for her intuition and the stranger's help. My family and I used to live in a rough neighborhood when I was a kid. One night, it was just my mom, my 2 siblings, and I at home, and my dad was gone on a business trip. Around midnight, someone started knocking on our door. My mom woke up, went to the front door, and asked who it was. No one answered. She thought that maybe it was some kids playing ding-dong ditch, so she went back to bed. About 30 minutes later, again, someone starts knocking. She gets up and peers through the side window to see if she can spot anyone out there, but nobody is there. She starts to worry, so she goes back to the room, grabs my dad's double barrel, and sits in the living room in the dark, waiting. Then, more knocking. My mom begins shouting at whoever it is that she is going to call the cops and that if anyone tries to come in, she would shoot them. At about 2 o'clock, the police finally show up and do a quick search outside of our house while we waited inside. After their search, they tell my mom that they had found a piece of barbed wire about 4 feet long next to the front door and asked if it belonged to my mom. She said that it wasn't hers and asked why. The cop told her it belonged to whoever was knocking on the door, that they were planning on strangling my mom with the barbed wire when she opened the door to see who was knocking. They said that she was very smart to not open the door to see who was there, otherwise it could have cost her life. The cops said that they'd patrol the neighborhood until morning and do a thorough investigation once there was daylight. That morning, as they were searching around the house, they found footprints leading around to the back of the house and up to my bedroom window. They had also found nicks in the window sill where the person was trying to pry it open to break in but failed. My mom always suspected it was this one neighbor because he would always stare at my mom through his curtains and wasn't very friendly. He also knew when my dad wasn't home, since he knows what vehicle he drives. We moved out of that house after that,